Oh, about 40 years ago, I wrote a really classic book. This is a book that's it's on patterns. It's Roland Martin's 101 Bass Catching Secrets, and it talks all about how my early career was based around finding patterns, and this book explains how to do that. And it was that exact set of water and cover conditions that attract fish to that spot and other similar spots simultaneously all around the lake. So once you'd find a spot on a point, so for example, with some stumps, find another stumpy point in the exact same depth of water, exact same temperature of water, exact same clarity of water, exact same everything, and possibly you'd find more fish. So that's kind of the concept of a pattern. Anyway, I decided to write a second book. Well, the second book came along, and it was this really good guy. We did a lot of work down the Keys. His name is Kevin Minneo. He's a lawyer out of California. Had a radio show out there as well. And Kevin had come down and been diagnosed with cancer. And so he'd been a very successful lawyer, and he said that last year of his life, what he wanted to do was just travel all around the country and just fish all the time because he was dying. He was dying of cancer. And then at the same time, to kind of justify it and rationalize it, he called me and he said, Roland, he said, we'd talked before I'd met him, and he says, you want to write another book. You've had a really successful book with this one. I had like 200,000 copies of this. This was really a successful book. In fact, Winchester Press said out of this book, this first one, it was the second most successful book they ever had. And I said, well, what was the first most successful book? And they said, well, it was a book on bird watching. So I guess there's more bird watchers than bass fishing, but anyway. So anyway, Kevin out of California had that last year or so of his life, he said, well, let's just get together and we'll write a second book. And it'll be called Bumps Along the Tournament Trail. And that's all the crazy things that happen and all the dumb things that happen and all the bad things that happen. Now this is all good stuff. All these little anecdotes and stories are all good about nice, successful days where we caught a lot of fish. But the second book was going to be about all the problems we had. You know, like last week I talked about the jokes we used to play on each other. But there were many, many disappointments along the trail. You know, like different times where I came in second. In other words, I won a lot of tournaments. You see behind me, I won like almost 20 tournaments. I think I won 19 tournaments. But I also came in like 19 second place times. And those bugged me more than anything. Coming in second when you're just an ounce or two away was just the worst part of being, that was the worst thing. And I can think of 3 or 4 tournaments where I should have won the tournament. I had it all won, and I didn't because of some stupid thing. And that's the kind of thing I was going to write the second book on, the bumps on the tournament trail. Well, anyway, I'll get in and I'll tell you some of those stories in a second. But the funny thing that happened was we spent a year. I traveled with Kevin. We went through the FLW trail, and I went through the Bass trail, and I fished all over the country. This was like 15 years ago, and we did a lot of work together. And we had the whole book was written, and he had it we had thousands of photographs done, thousands of stories all about how I fished with President Bush and all the kind of things like that, all these different stupid stories and anecdotes, and it was all in a computer. Well, Kevin got real sick, terminally ill, and went back to California, and he passed away. Unfortunately, that computer with all that work in it, oh, listen to this big storm. One reason why I'm in here, you hear that lightning storm? That's a big giant storm outside right now. That's why I can't be outside. But anyway, all his work, we'd spent a year writing this second book. And it was beautiful. It's just all these little funny little stories and bad things that happened. And the computer got trashed somehow, and somehow or other after his death, we never recovered the computer. And it was all to be published, and the proceeds, half the proceeds of the book was going to go to his widow, and everything was all fine, but all the material was lost somehow. We don't know what happened to the computer. Everything was just a mess. So we never wrote the book. But it kind of bugs me because I have these hundreds of stories and things that happened and bumps along the tournament trail. I kind of want to write a second book, but I can tell you a couple of them just real quick, and a couple of the things that happened that really got me down. I remember one time I was out on Lake Powell. It was back in the 80s. It was in the mid 80s, and it was Lake Powell in Arizona. And the first day of the tournament, I went out and went way up the river into this I don't know, little bayou, and I'd found a bunch of fish all the way up at Bullfrog. And at the time, D. Thomas was a big flipper, and D. Thomas kept wanting to find some fish, and he wasn't doing very good in the tournament. But I didn't go to Bullfrog. That was 80 miles up the lake. I didn't want to go that far, so I went half that far up this little bayou, and I forgot the name of the creek, and I went back in there, and there was a cave, an Indian cave. It was the coolest thing in the world. You go along, it came around the corner, and there was a hole in the rock. The water was just right, and you go through the hole, and you could take the boat into the cave, in an Indian cave. Now right now, Lake Powell's high right now, and you can't get into that little cave. But that cave, when I got into it, it opened up, and it was bigger than this room. It was an Indian cave. I mean, it was gigantic inside. And it took me about 5 or 10 minutes when I found the cave that in the practice. It took me 5 or 10 minutes. I could barely focus on anything. And finally, I could see the wall over here and some water over here, and it was just kind of a big deal. I could go back in there about 200 feet. It was really neat. And the bass were in there. So I fished in there and a couple other places the first day, and I had about 20 pounds. Fished in there the second day, and some other areas too. And now I'm leading the tournament with 42 pounds. I got like 21 pounds each day. I mean, this is 5 fish, a beautiful bunch of bass. I'm fixing to win the tournament. I'm leading the tournament. And so I get the third day partner, and I said, well, hey, partner, what you doing, son? He said, you usually flip a coin for whose boat you're going to take and stuff like that. Back then, that was the invitationals were set up that way. And I said, I'm leading the tournament, so I'd like to take my boat. He said, that's fine. He said, that's fine. He said, do you have any places to go fish? And he said, no, not really. He says, let me tell you something, Roland. He says, I'm from Laurel, Maryland. I'm from Laurel, Maryland. That's where I grew up, Laurel, Maryland. And he says, you're a big star in Laurel back at your hometown. Everybody reveres you. He says, I'm kind of an up-and-coming fisherman myself back there, and I'd like to make a name for myself. I said, really? Okay. Now, I'm leading the tournament now. He says, yeah. He says, my desire today is just to beat you. I said, well, wait a minute. I'm not in competition with you particularly. I'm in competition with the whole field, and I'm just ounces away from winning the tournament. And so I don't want to really be in competition with you so much. Let's just fish together and have a good time and let it go like that. No. He said, the only thing I can do, I haven't caught a fish this whole tournament. I just want to beat you. I said, well, daggone, you're going to put a lot of pressure on me. I hope you don't hurt me. Well, no, I just want to beat you. So anyway, how he did it, and here was the bad part. Think of this for a second. If I made a cast, and I was using jigs at the time, jigs and also spinner baits, and double spins, all kind of different things, all kind of spinner baits. But whatever I threw at the rock wall, say I threw right there and I came a foot away from the big old rock and it started sinking down. If he threw his lure, just think of this for a second, about 3 foot at my lure, but about 3 or 4 foot this way, what would happen would be my lure would come along. Let's see now, how's it work? Okay, if he threw his lure, and he more or less throw on top of my lure, and the fish would actually hit his lure because it would plop in the water right kind of when mine would get their attention, his would come plopping in. Anyway, that's what he started doing. I took him to the first place about halfway up to that cave, and he kept picking my fish off. He caught 2 or 3, and I said, wait a minute, you're kind of throwing right on top of me, and I'm just about the time the fish are ready to hit my lure, you're throwing in there, and you're catching these bass, and I haven't caught much of anything, you've caught a couple. He said, well, I just want to beat you. And I said, well, man, I can't, man, please, I just want to win this tournament. We finally get to the cave. We get in there, and I know where the walls are, and I know where to cast because I've been in there. And as soon as we got in there, it was bright sun outside. As soon as we get in the cave, it's black, and you can't see anything. It takes about 5 minutes for your eyes to adjust to see. And so I got into the cave, and I knew right where to go because I'd been in the cave a couple times now. And so I came in the cave, and I threw over there. I caught one. Oh, boy, this is good. And I threw over there, and I caught another one. And about that time, he started throwing right on top of me again. Man, he caught the biggest one. It would have won the tournament. And then, I don't know, I ended up catching a limit of fish. The whole point is, I ended up catching a limit of fish. He ended up beating me. He didn't place in the tournament. I came in second place. But that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. You know, people are out to gun, out to get you, and that's not the first time, because that was another time at Lake Gaston, and this had the exact same thing happen. In fact, that day on Lake Gaston, Paul Elias is leading the tournament. He's on a buzzbait on the dam, but I'm doing real good. I'm right there in the top 4 or 5, and I have a good chance to win the tournament. And the first thing I do is I come on to this big stumpy point with the buzzbait. There's a big stump out there, and I throw it out to the 3rd day of the tournament. I'm way up high in the tournament, and the first thing I do is this big old bass, about 6 or 8 pounds, just blows up on my buzzbait. I miss it. I said, just hold what you got. I'm going to throw back and catch that fish. That's my fish. He said, no, I'll get it. And he throws on top of my fish to just hit the buzzbait, which is that's not etiquette. That's not what you're supposed to do. That's what you don't do. If I have a big strike and I say, hey, let me throw back, you're supposed to honor that if you're a partner. But he didn't honor it. He said, threw right back in there. I guess what? He caught the big bass of the tournament. He caught an 8-pound bass on a buzzbait. Now, that one fish by itself would have not only been the big fish of the tournament, but it would have won me the tournament. But that's not the end of the story. We get down to the lake, and we're down in front of the dam, and there's a bunch of this, I guess you call it Johnson weed or some kind of grass that's growing out of the water. The top of it's sticking up at this high, and there's about 2 feet of water underneath it. Anyway, I was taking this little worm. I was throwing a little cream worm of some sort, and I was getting bit, and he had a little ringworm. Had a funny color, little ringworm on a little bitty weight. He threw it, bam, he caught one. Bam, he caught another one. Bam, he caught another one. And I knew I needed another couple of fish because he had that big one already. He had the big fish of the tournament. Plus, he's catching them right and left. And he's got a bag of these things. And I said, man, I can win the tournament. All I need to do is catch a couple more bass. I think I can win this tournament. I said, can I borrow one of your worms? He said, no, you can't borrow any worms. I only have 5 or 6 left, and I need them. Huh. That's the kind of partners we had. I mean, this was, I didn't win. I think I came in 3rd or something. But the point was, I had it in the bag. But I think back of there's a whole bunch of them like this. There's like 10 of them like this. But another one that was really funny was early on. It was on Beaver Lake, and Don Butler was alive then. Don Butler was the winner of the first Bassmaster Classic, and so Don, he was doing pretty good at the tournament. It was Beaver Lake, and he was really catching them. Well, I was catching them too, and I tell you what I was catching them on. At the time, they had a little chrome, little what's called it's called a hellbender. It was just not the 900 series. I caught the big ones on the 900 series, but this one was a real small one, about 3 inches long. And I threw it on pretty light line, about 12-pound line. And the whole pattern was early spring, and it was a little bit of runoff. Now, Beaver Lake is a real clear White River chain lake. And whenever it rains, a big pattern, a huge pattern there, is that these creeks start to run in a little bit of dingy water, and there's some flow there. The fish really get stacked up in these places. And boy, on Washita, Bull Shoals, Table Rock, Beaver, all those lakes like that where there was a lot of water coming in, as soon as the rain would hit, we'd rush to the back of these coves. And sure enough, I rushed to the back of these coves, and I was throwing that little bitty thing. Well, the water was high, and there was a barbed wire fence there. I'm just ounces behind Don Butler. It's the last day of the tournament. And I had this guy, and we had nets at the time. At the time, we could use a net. At the time, I came up to the barbed wire fence. I came right up to it, and I couldn't go any farther because the barbed wire fence is there. And I took my little crankbait. It's about 3 foot water. And I throw the little crankbait past it. I hooked this gigantic bass, the biggest one I'd hooked all week. He's at least 7 pounds or so. He's plenty big enough to be probably the big bass of the tournament and for sure win the tournament. Those two things, for sure. I get it up to the boat, and he comes down, and he reaches out with the net, and I said, net him, and he gets the fish in the net. The fish is in the net. It's in the net. And he pulls it back, and he gets it hung on the barbed wire fence. The bottom of the net is on the barbed wire fence, and I'm reaching out as far as I am, all stuck in the mud and everything else, and I can't quite reach the whole thing. And so I tell him to finally just to drop the net. So he drops the net, and he can't pull it any farther, and I can't reach that net. And so finally it's swimming, and finally the fish gets off the hook somehow and swims out of the net. It's just one of these crazy things. I was so mad at that guy for getting that net hung in the daggone barbed wire fence. That just killed me. And, you know, there's just stories like that to go on. I could look at almost every one of these tournaments. And not only that, but I look at the second place winners, and I see 9-time Angler of the Year. Okay, these are first times, but then they were second place winners. Yeah, this is tournament runner-ups. Now, here was a Kissimmee Lake tournament. Here was a Kissimmee Lake tournament in 1977. I'll tell you what happened there. That was so crazy. I went down to Kissimmee Lake, and Tom Mann, Sr., the guy that has the company, the big Mann's Bait Company, makes jelly worms and all that, he was really doing well. He was fishing the upper end of the, listen to that rain and thunder, He was fishing the upper end of Kissimmee Lake. And I was fishing back in Overstreet, the Overstreet arm of the lake. It's kind of the northeast side of the lake, kind of up there. There was a bunch of grass there. But in the grass, here was the pattern. There'd be almost all Kissimmee grass all over the place. It sticks up about this high, and there's about 4 or 5 feet of water underneath it. There'd be little patches of lily pads. And the lily pads are about this big around, and there'd be a little patch of them with about 10 or 15 lilies in a little patch about this big. That's what you wanted to find, all by itself. And I'd take a worm, and in this case I had a pretty light weight on it, 20-pound line. I'd do a little pitch cast. I'd throw it out there and just watch the line, be a line watcher. And as the line would sink in under the shade of those lily pads, you'd see the line go doop. And boy, I was catching fish, and I'd really found that pattern. And see, that was the whole thing about this book. I'm a pattern fisherman, so each and every tournament, I'm trying to find a different pattern. Well, that was the pattern I found. It was the lily pads, little lily pad like this. It got to be the last day of the tournament. I'm about a pound behind Tom Mann. I flip, get this, I flip into the bushes, and I got a 20-pound line. I hooked this great big bass, and I said, get the net, get the net. He's fumbling around the back, and I just kind of swing the bass at the boat. It's like a 5-pound bass. It won't win big bass, but it'll certainly win me the tournament. It'll certainly 100% win me the tournament. I get him in the boat, and he's jumping, and all of a sudden the hook comes out of his mouth, and this is a bass that's in the boat. It's a big old bass, this big, he's just flopping on the deck. And the guy's standing there, right there with the net like this, about a foot from the fish. And I'm saying, put the net on the fish, put the net on the fish, because the fish is free. He's not hooked anything. I said, put the net on the fish. And he's, huh? He's looking at me, huh? What? I said, put the net down, get the net, get the fish. Plop, flopped right over the side of the boat. The fish is gone. My tournament's gone. I come in second place. You know, they're the kind of things, I mean, that's just a couple of them. I got like 20 of them like that have really kind of disappointing, really, really disappointing deals where the fish is like in the boat, in the net. I mean, just 100% caught and yet not caught. So that's the kind of things that I'm talking about. We had just a great time with the tournament trail back then, and I still think about those grand old glorious times. I just wish I'd written that book. The book was so cool, would have been bumps along the tournament trail. It would have really been something. Well, listen, I'll tell you, it's nice me telling you these stories. I just love it. It's old time stuff. It gets me all excited thinking about the old tournaments. And I'm kind of recuperating right now from this hernia surgery, but I'm about ready to start fishing again. So listen, hit that likes button. My people at Bass Pro Shop, they just love the likes, and of course my O'Reilly people are good. I got the greatest sponsors in the world. I just really enjoy doing not only the YouTube but the television show that I do as well, and that's on on World Fishing Network. It's on the Sportsman Channel at times. It's on a lot of different channels, and so look for my television show, Fishing with Roland Martin. Hey, we'll see you again soon, and hey, thanks for watching.